The San Francisco 49ers are currently one of the best teams in the NFL. With a star-studded defense led by Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, and an offense with weapons like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers boast one of the best all-around rosters in the NFL. But the piece that puts this whole team together is the man under center, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy has had a historic start to his career. He is 12-3 as the starter in the regular season, and in his rookie year, he led the 49ers to an NFC Championship game appearance. Currently, Brock Purdy is leading the NFL in passer rating and has thrown 18 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Just yesterday, Purdy became only the third quarterback in 49ers history to have a perfect passer rating, and the other two quarterbacks were Steve Young and Joe Montana. With Brock Purdy's immediate success, it feels as if he's been the 49ers quarterback for the past 5 years. And it certainly doesn't feel like Brock Purdy's a guy who hasn't even started a full season in the NFL yet. And it's kind of crazy to think that last year, Brock Purdy was just another guy fighting for a roster spot. So how did the 49ers wind up here? And how did Brock Purdy save the 49ers from facing the consequences of one of the worst decisions in the history of the NFL draft? But before we get into the video, guys, I just want to say thank you all so much for 1,000 subscribers on this channel. And if you're new to the channel and you like the NFL, trust me, you're in the right spot. After going 2-14 in 2016, the 49ers decided it was time to clean house as they fired head coach Chip Kelly and general manager Trent Baalke. Then comes along John Lynch. The former All-Pro safety lands his first job as an executive, and now he's the general manager faced with the task of turning around the 49ers organization. And his first big move was hiring Kyle Shanahan to be the head coach. After being the offensive coordinator in Atlanta and helping Matt Ryan win his only MVP award, Shanahan was ready to become an NFL head coach. The only problem was, the 49ers were still a very bad team. During Shanahan's first season, the 49ers would switch between Brian Hoyer and CJ Beathard as their starting quarterbacks, and the team would begin the season with an 0-8 record. Meanwhile, Jimmy Garoppolo was one of the hottest trade targets going into the trade deadline. At that time, he was Tom Brady's backup, and with there being no imminent end to Brady's time in New England, Garoppolo wanted the opportunity to start elsewhere. And despite there being strong interest from quarterback-needy teams like the Browns and the Jets, John Lynch decided to make a splash and trade for his new quarterback of the future. As right before the trade deadline, it was announced that the 49ers traded for Jimmy G. And it wasn't until week 13 where Jimmy Garoppolo would get his first start with the 49ers. After inheriting a team that was 1-10, Jimmy Garoppolo would proceed to win the final 5 games of the season and help lead the 49ers to a record of 6-10. The Jimmy Garoppolo trade was an instant success for the 49ers, and it gave them a lot of hope going into 2018. However, this hope would fade away very quickly, as in week 3, Jimmy Garoppolo would go down with a knee injury that was the dreaded ACL tear, which meant that Garoppolo would miss the rest of 2018, and the 49ers would finish 4-12 on the season. So now the real pressure was on in 2019. The 49ers gambled on Jimmy G, and they passed up the opportunity to draft other quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in 2017. Jimmy Garoppolo needed to work out, and 2019 was the success that it needed to be. In the first full season with Jimmy Garoppolo as the starter, the 49ers finished the season with a 13-3 record, and the 49ers made it all the way to the Super Bowl. But due to some late game mistakes by Garoppolo, the 49ers fell to the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 54. This was when the first real question marks started rising about Jimmy Garoppolo, and it honestly felt like Jimmy Garoppolo was the weakest link of this 49ers offense, as in the NFC Championship game, Garoppolo only attempted 8 passes for a total of 77 yards. This was the first time since 1973 that a team finished with less than 10 passing attempts in a playoff game. So going into the 2020 season, there was a big question on if Jimmy Garoppolo was more of a game manager or a true franchise quarterback that could lead the 49ers to victories. But the 2020 season was the perfect example of a Super Bowl hangover for the 49ers as they finished 6-10 and missed the playoffs for the third time in 4 seasons. And this made the 49ers Super Bowl appearance look like a complete fluke. And the biggest story of the season was that Jimmy Garoppolo only started 6 games as he was battling injuries for the majority of the year. This means that this was another season where Garoppolo was injured. So on top of the question marks surrounding Garoppolo's ability to succeed when it matters the most, now there's a ton of injury question marks with Garoppolo as well. Going into the 2021 NFL Draft, there were a lot of highly coveted quarterback prospects. This led to the 49ers making a huge splash, and they decided to trade up from the 12th overall pick to the 3rd overall pick. A deal where the 49ers sent the 12th overall pick, a 2022 first and 3rd round pick, and another first round pick in 2023 to the Miami Dolphins. This meant that the 49ers were all in on one of the quarterbacks out of this draft class, and they had to trade up to go get their guy. And their guy was Trey Lance out of North Dakota State University. Trey Lance was widely regarded as the biggest project of the 2021 draft class, but many people believed that he had the highest ceiling. And with Jimmy Garoppolo still on the team, there was no pressure for Trey Lance to start immediately. But this was a career-defining move for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Trey Lance had to pan out, or else they would both be at risk of losing their jobs. We see it all the time in the NFL. A team takes a quarterback in the first round, the quarterback then underperforms, and within 2 seasons, the quarterback's replaced and the general manager and head coach are fired. This is an inevitable cycle that we see all the time in the NFL. And not only that, but the 49ers were only 1 season removed from nearly winning a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. This meant that the only way for Trey Lance to be better than Garoppolo was if Trey Lance won a Super Bowl as a 49er. This was a huge amount of pressure for a man who only started 17 games in college. And in 2021, Trey Lance would get the opportunity to start in 2 games as Garoppolo missed some time with injury. Lance would look mediocre at best, but nobody really cared because the 49ers still ended up with a 10-7 record. And with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, the team made yet another NFC Championship game where Garoppolo threw the interception that cost the 49ers the game. So going into 2022, it was announced that despite leading the team to their 2nd NFC Championship game appearance in 3 years, Jimmy Garoppolo would be the backup quarterback to Trey Lance. This was clearly a move by Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to prove that drafting Trey Lance wasn't a mistake. And Trey Lance would look terrible in his first game of the season and unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury in only week 2 of 2022, which meant that the team would once again turn back to Jimmy G as their starting quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo would go 8-3 as the starter, but unfortunately he would also get injured against the Miami Dolphins in week 12. This meant that the 49ers had no choice but to turn to a rookie quarterback who they drafted with the last pick in the 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy. And as we know, Purdy would finish the season 5-0 as the starter and lead the 49ers back to the NFC Championship game. So going into 2023, the 49ers decided to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and he signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. And they also decided that the Trey Lance experiment was officially over, and after only appearing in 4 games with the team, they traded Trey Lance to the Dallas Cowboys. And now the Brock Purdy era has officially begun. And as he's just in his 2nd season, the story of Brock Purdy is still being written. But his immediate success in the NFL has given us all amnesia. Who would have thought that the man that was Mr. Irrelevant would be the same man who saved an entire organization from facing the fallout of making one of the worst decisions in the history of the NFL draft? And now with Zach Wilson officially being the 3rd string quarterback in New York, I want you guys to let me know in the comments who you think is a bigger bust, Zach Wilson or Trey Lance. And once again, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, as it will go a long way in helping me grow this channel for you. And I'll see you next time.